The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
What were your favorite snacks growing up?
Oh, that's so fun. What a fun question. I was kind of really into ham. I loved ham sandwiches. I'm sorry.
What's up, besties? Welcome back to another episode of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes. And guess what? I'm still the second part of that title. If you want to eat cereal with us this week, please do. The cereal that we have this week is Off Limits Dash cereal, which is a coffee cereal. I'm not sure if there are many coffee cereals. However, you can get Dash at eatofflimits.com or Target. But if you want to just have your favorite cereal or a chocolate cereal that you have in your house while you listen to this episode or watch this episode, please do. We don't discriminate when it comes to cereal here at Childlike at Best. Today's guest, I'm very excited about. Today's guest is Alyssa Sabo. Alyssa is a very talented and hilarious actress, improviser, and comedian. She has a podcast called Totally Rad, and she's been featured on some of my favorite podcasts like Artists on Artists on Artists on Artists and Good Christian Fun. This is such a fun and silly episode. There's a lot of laughs in it. We laugh constantly, and we're doing a whole bunch of different bits throughout. I think that you guys are really going to love this episode. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with the very funny and the very talented Alyssa Sabo. I mean, I don't want to...
Commitment.
Yeah, commitment and all that stuff. And just like we were talking about Jeremy Colhane from Artists on Artists on Artists on Artists, and which is one of my favorite...
How many... artists. I don't even know. But I felt like that was right. Yeah.
No, it's 4 of them because it's 4 people.
Oh, so that's, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the only moron that knows. But anyway, like even Angela doesn't even know the name of the goddamn podcast. And I'm like, artists on artists on artists on artists. And like but yeah, like those guys are so funny. And like, you know, I was saying this off air, but like, you know, one of the reasons why I have such a talent crush on you is because you have so much commitment in all of your stuff. And it reminds me, you know, of like, especially when you did Totally Rad and things like that, where you were playing kind of this teenage Christian character. It reminded me so much of who I was as a kid. This like kind of like doesn't think their shit stinks, you know, kind of person.
100%.
Yeah, and
well,
yeah,
isn't it funny? Like I obviously am always thinking about this sort of stuff, and
sure.
I mean, I guess that's not obvious. I don't know. Anyways, obviously I'm thinking about it. But and it's like I'm like, you know, as much as there's been a lot of stuff about growing up in the church that is kind of been harmful in certain areas, for the most part, like I think growing up and having my confidence and my self-esteem being in like, hey, the creator of the universe loves you and he's the best and he's never gonna like forsake you and you're awesome because of him. Like it was a weird, like ultimately it's like, I guess kids are gonna put their worth in something, you know, and some maybe like go down the path of like drinking and drugs and partying and like and wanting to get approval from their peers. And I never wanted that because I had my approval from God. And so it's like, even though it's like messed up and I'm sure there's like dark implications, I'm like, ultimately it was good. You know what I mean? Like it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the worst thing in the world.
No, that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And like the whole time it made me think of this, which was Chris Pine, the actor, he doesn't believe in God, which I find that to be hilarious because when you look like that, you've got to believe in God, right? Like, I mean, like it's just wild, you know, like he's like, yeah, there's no God. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like you won the genetic lottery. Like, of course there's a God.
Oh, wow.
You know?
So you think just because people are hot that they should believe in God? That's a funny take. Yeah.
That's
I'm sorry. If you're hot, you have to believe in God.
Yeah, you have to. That's just
funny.
That is, I didn't realize that's what I was saying until you said it. And you're right.
And you know what? I respect that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, everybody I've met that believes in God is hot. So
They're hot.
that's usually
Yeah.
that's
No,
usually the way
I
it is.
guess. Yeah, I guess I know some hot
Yeah.
believers. And
Yeah.
then, yeah,
Most of
that's
them
funny.
play in a worship band, but
Yep.
yeah. No, for sure. So I'm glad that you're on the podcast. I'm glad that we could finally figure this out. I wanted to just start where we usually start, which is, where did you grow up?
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is a very small town about an hour and a half south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So very
Okay.
much Western PA, kind of grew up in the woods. Really kind of just was
Mhm.
a woods girl, just kind of sitting in the
Right.
woods. There was
Just
like
sitting in the
one,
woods.
I was sitting in the woods. There was, we had like one Walmart, and that was it. Like it was just, it's just very, I don't know. I was just back
And that was the
home.
thing to do.
That was the
Yeah.
thing. We would go to Walmart and we would get McDonald's ice cream inside of the Walmart.
Sure.
But I
Yeah.
was,
Hey,
yeah.
man.
So, anyways, yeah. But that's it. I feel like I'm like I'm like a political candidate. I'll like ramble on for hours about one question.
No, I love it.
You asked one
Yeah,
question, I'm
well, I
like
mean,
Johnstown, yeah. But we say
well, the
yins.
thing, to be fair, you're not a political candidate in that, you don't, you don't like, you might ramble on, but at least I'm getting somewhere, with like your
Sure,
answer.
and
Because most of the time,
I am giving you information, but I'm gonna, yeah, like I
yeah.
just caught myself. I was like about to like go into this whole like speech about my
Yeah.
town, and I was like, I don't think he asked for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the original question was, what is your belief on abortion? And you're just like,
And I will
I'm from
say,
Pennsylvania.
so when you look at it, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania being so, and here we are, and we're in Johnstown,
Yeah,
and there were
yeah,
deer in my backyard. Thank you. Thank you. Next question.
yeah.
Next question.
No, I love it. So what kind of a kid would you say that you were growing up in school? Like, who did you sit with at the lunch table? That kind of
Oh,
thing.
I was okay, so this is good. So I was kind of, and I think this might be a normal thing. Like, I feel like kids are always, they need to have like their best friend. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I went to a school from like K through third grade. And at that school, I had my best friend, Sarah. And that was it. Like,
Mm,
that was like all I needed was that I had her and it was me and her and I could do anything. And sure, there was like other people in the friend group, but it was just like, as long as I had Sarah, I was invincible. Then I moved to a new school in third grade. And that is when I remember kind of like, I was sort of that first day of school, just kind of a sweet girl invited me to sit with her. And, she was just very like, just the nice kind of like, I guess you would call her a nerd. And she was,
mhm.
took to me and was just nice to me. And I was kind of painfully shy, especially during this move, because I was like,
Okay.
scared. And then I remember maybe about like a month or two in to the school year, I brought in all of this gum, this Spice Girls gum that had Spice Girls stickers like within each piece of gum. And
Sure.
my great uncle owned like a candy wholesale store. And so I had all this like gum
Oh,
and I brought that in. And I remember like literally becoming popular because of that gum. And I got
sure.
invited to sit at the popular kids table, and I can't tell you how easy of a decision it was for me to ditch that nerdy girl and go to the popular table. Like, I never made a decision quicker in my life. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Stacy, I gotta go. And I went, and then I was like in with the cool girls from like, so
That's
from third
awesome.
to fifth grade, I was in the popular girl group. And then
Wow. You
and
had
again,
that
here's a
gum for 2
long-winded
years?
question. I had that gum for 2 years, and that kept my spot secure. And then
Yeah.
when we got to middle school, it was a classic thing of like all of the girls and the cool girls, like they were kind of developing. They were like going through puberty, getting like boobs, and and they were just like really, their coolness was like shining through, and that wasn't happening
Sure.
for me, and I got kind of booted out. And so I remember, this is like 100%, it's like weird
everyone.
how it happens. But then in sixth
Yeah.
grade, that's when I really kind of like, and that's when you're kind of becoming more who you are. That's when I really kind of found my people. And then I found my best friend Katie, who was like on the soccer team and just like like a sweetheart. So it was like Katie, and then I was playing soccer. I was pretty good at my schoolwork, and and then I started to get more involved in church. So I had this like group of girls that we were just the like, all the teachers loved us. We were like goofballs, we were like reenacting, like doing scenes from like Law and Order, like instead of going to parties, like, and we were just like, that we were sort of sporty. And then, I was like president of my class, and because I had a lot of energy. But of course, through all of that, like, even though I was like, I'm sure people like tolerated me, I was very, very much a Jesus freak. So I was kind of this weird like entity. I felt like I had some friends, but I still kind of felt a little bit like, but are these people like, is anybody really like as in love with Jesus as I am? You know what I mean? And that kind of like, that kind of took on a whole new meaning kind of once I was in high school, kind of. So yeah, it was, I don't know if that really like answered it. It doesn't fit into that neat category, but
completely
kind
answers
of the journey too. You know what I mean? Like to have that little like period of like a few years where I was very much in the popular group. And
no, I love that. And
I was mean. It's what, oh,
you were
sorry.
Mean? No, you were
no,
mean.
Well, there's this story that I have to share because it's so funny.
Please.
And my best friend, Lauren, who like is still my, one of my best friends to this day, she, when I was a popular girl, she came up to me on the playground and she was like, hey, Alyssa, like, cause we had this group of tag, and she was like, she either had to ask me or some of the other popular girls if she could be in the group of tag. So she comes up and she goes, hey, can I play tag with you? And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I have to ask, and I'll bleep her name out. We'll say her name was,
Sporty Spice.
We'll say her name was Mel. I was like, I have to ask Melanie. Let me ask Melody. And I turned around and like looked at a tree and then turned back around and I said, Melanie says no. And she was like, you didn't ask anybody. And I was like, I gotta go. And then I like ran away. And then like later, me and her became like really good friends. And she told me that story about like, she was like, that was like one of the lowest moments for me. And you just like didn't let me play tag. And I was like, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
like, you know what I mean? So like and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. But anyways, that's
kids are so evil, man.
Like, they really are. And like, but then it's like you get, and then I feel like bad because like the only way I became nice was because I got like booted out. Like I did not become nice on my own volition because I was like, oh, I better be nice now. You know what I mean? They just kicked me out and I was like, I hope somebody accepts me. So I don't really deserve that love, but I mean,
it's a stereotypical high school movie for a reason because that's just what happens. It's like
exactly how it is.
Sort of. Everybody that wasn't cool gets cool because they brought Power Ranger action figures for one day. And then they realize, oh, like I'm popular for a day, and then it's over. For some people,
it's over.
Yeah, and
for me, fair, it was 2 years.
Yeah, well, and not to mention, like I think that it's kind of it's a good thing that I don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe there are some cool people that are great that that grew up and to be like great people and all that stuff. But like, I feel like that kind of stuff builds character. And because it builds character, as an adult, you become just a better human being,
Oh yeah, and I mean, I
because
think
you're
that's
not
all totally. I mean, it's one of those things where like I could talk about my, I could talk about my like childhood. It's like, I mean, I'm in therapy. I'm very like in tune with like the younger version of myself, maybe like too much so. But I also, I went to college and studied like education, and most of the experience I have like is working with kids. I am very like, I believe that you know what I mean? Like, I just think
The
that, like,
children are the
if
future.
you, I believe the children are the future. But do you know what I mean? Like, and so, but I was so painfully uncomfortable in my body for like
Mhm.
so much of my childhood. I felt so like awkward. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know that like
Of course.
those awkward years, those awkward years, I felt like my awkward years were just like so much longer than the average person's awkward years. And do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, there were so many
I do.
mornings when I woke up and just felt like, I can't wait for this body to become like my normal body, and it just,
Right.
I just feel like it took me a lot longer. And I didn't go through puberty until, much later. I was actually like 18,
Oh, wow.
which is very old, like to get your
Yeah.
first period or whatever. So that,
Yeah.
that was kind of like, it wasn't just in my mind. I think that it was kind of like a weird kind of
If it
experience.
makes you feel any better, I still haven't gotten mine, so it's okay.
Okay. And
But
you know what? It's coming. I feel
yeah,
it. It's going to
I'll feel
happen
it.
for you.
Yeah. We'll get there. We'll get there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny because I feel like it adds a giant wrinkle when you grow up at church being that
Yes.
person as well, because I can only speak for what it was like being an awkward man or an awkward boy,
And
at
where are
that
you
time,
from?
which I'm from Miami. Yeah,
Okay.
that's where I grew up. Yeah, that's where I
Okay.
grew up. And so
Yeah.
um the whole thing was like, there's this, especially like back then, and I'm sure this happened to you as well, where it was just like, you know, there's this perfect person for you and you have to save yourself for that person, and then you think that you
Oh,
found your
yeah.
person, but then they're not your person, and then, or
Well,
that
and
person
yeah.
doesn't feel anything for you,
Well,
you
that's
know
another thing. Yeah, I feel like growing up in the church, like for those that took it really seriously, and maybe like dating wasn't even really an option for me, but like I do feel like I was
right.
robbed of that like normal fun, kind of like those high school
Me too.
fun dating experiences, because I was very like I took that very seriously. And I mean, I had crushes on like every boy, but I like nobody really was looking my way. And also I
Sure.
remember just being like, well, if he's not a Christian, I can't even think about him. And like, it's just weird to
Right.
like already be taking it so seriously at that age, you know what I mean? And just being
Right.
like, and I feel like, my first kiss, I was 20 years old when I had my first kiss. And like,
Okay.
you feel like, I think like growing up in the church for some people, there's this like arrested development that happens where, you know what I mean? It kind
100%.
of
I was
makes
just gonna
you,
say that.
yeah. So, and that's, and that is weird, but ultimately I'm like, I'm also like grateful for it because it's like informed a lot of like my life. And I can't, like, what am I going to do? Be mad that I didn't have my first kiss when I was like 14? It's like, no, that's just
Yeah.
not, that just didn't happen for me. And but it is like weird. I do remember like feeling really weird and taking everything like way too seriously, and
100%.
and
Yeah, well,
feeling so much shame if I had like a horny thought and like was feeling horny.
yeah,
And I was feeling horny all the time, and so I
of
was always
course.
feeling shame and like, and just
Of
like,
course.
and
Yeah,
then you
well, that's
transfer
kind of
that horniness onto Jesus, and that's weird.
well, that's extremely weird, but yeah. No, but
What are
that's
you gonna
true. I
do
mean,
with it?
it explains so much. Like it explains, even music, like back then, like it
Yes,
explains why so many songs are so fucking horny all the time, like
right.
Jackie Velasquez's I Get on My Knees, and like where it's just like, hey dude, I'm
I
13, my body's exploding right now, like
Wow.
can we not talk about
I
this? It's
forgot
8 in the
about that
morning.
song.
Like,
I forgot about that song. I
oh
get
yeah,
it
I will
on
never
my
forget.
knees. Is that how it goes? I get
Yeah.
it on. And she also sang,
Yeah.
"There's gotta be more to life," right? Then chasing
Yeah.
down every.
Yeah.
Can we keep that on? Is that
The
illegal?
thing the thing that's crazy, the thing that's really crazy about, I mean, this is a lot of female singers, but especially Christian female singers back in the 90s. Why do you have to sound like you're having an orgasm all the time? Like
Right.
like
Well, and
it's
maybe they
just
were, and good for them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it was like in the studio for Rebecca St. James. Like,
they
I'm not going
were
to sit here
they
and
were
tell
just
you.
ultimately, when you think about the Christian music machine, that was just like what they were doing. They were still kind of, a business, and they were just like ultimately like
100%.
mirroring pop stars. So of course Rebecca St. James was like the Britney Spears, and
Right.
Jackie Velasquez was the
Well,
Christina Aguilera, and
I
Point of
always joke
Grace.
where I'm like, I always joke because like I listened to exclusively Christian music in the 90s. So the 90s, when it comes to music, unless it was humongously popular like it was in movies, I have a blind spot. Like, because
Well, yes.
majority of what I knew
See,
was DC Talk, Michael W. Smith, like
and that's the
Reliant
thing
K,
that's
like
kind of
stuff like that.
interesting. I know all of those, like those songs, but like I think music has always been a really big part of my life. And I think because I grew up with, like, my parents weren't necessarily so obsessed with like pushing Christian music onto me, because I don't think they didn't know
Okay.
what it was like. So I was listening to like whatever, and then but I started to feel my own convictions, especially when it came to music. And I just
Mhm.
remember having these like moments in my room by myself, kind of like listening to the Pussycat Dolls, like what was
Mhm.
that song where it was like, I'm gonna stick with you forever. Like I loved those like
Right.
kinds of songs, but then in my mind I was like, I would just be like, oh, I can sing this, and like it can be about God. Like I can stick
Right.
with God forever. You know what I mean? So I would do
Sure.
those like gymnastics in my head, and I remember like the most infamous thing that happened to me was like, and this is how I know it was like weird brainwashing, but I was going to my first church camp, and on the way to church camp, and this was when I was like, this was in like I was 12 years old, and I was like listening to like a Shania Twain CD, and like it was her
Yeah.
like pop album, and I remember, and it's like
Mhm.
that's a fine CD. It's like it's fun. It's like there's nothing bad about it. It's wholesome, but like I
Mhm.
remember listening to it, loving it, and then I remember like getting so brainwashed at that camp that on the way back I was like so distraught that I ever listened to that music, and I was like, I can't believe I was listening to this music that isn't worshiping Jesus Christ. And then I bought all these like CDs at the camp that were like whatever, like worship music. I think Matthew West was there that year, and I was like,
Sure.
Matthew West. And like, you know what I mean? And that's just so weird that because I don't think it's not like my parents or anybody was necessarily like telling me that. That was just some
Yeah.
weird brainwashing and maybe not even the church camp was like preaching that. Maybe
Mhm.
that was just my brain and like the tendencies I have, the OCD that I have, that
Yeah.
kind of like took it to this like level of like, if you're going to be a believer, you have to be a freaking 100% believer, 100%. And you can't, like, you
Right.
know what I mean? And you
Everything.
have to let it wash over everything about you.
Right. Everything was so final back then because it
Yes,
was it
black
was
and
so
white.
like, yeah, everything was so black and white in that you do this, you are bad. Like, you do this, like, whatever the case. Like, I remember we had a sermon, where like a pastor was talking about like, Blink 182 songs that we couldn't listen to, and like
Oh
Nickelback
no.
songs, and like all this stuff, you know. And like, I
That's
mean, to be
terrible.
fair, like, I'm kind of glad I didn't listen to some of it, but like,
That
to be
was God
fair,
protecting
that was
you.
the kind of in
That was God
right,
protecting
that was
you.
God protecting me from Nickelback, yeah, and like, and that's okay, but
And that's okay. No, yeah.
but it's true because like, you just feel so like going back to what you were saying, I resonated so hard with you saying mental gymnastics because like I really was that kid too, where like I would listen to a Linkin Park song and be like, in the end is about the crucifixion.
And
Like,
that's about Jesus
like,
coming back and saving us. Yeah. Oh man. I
yeah,
mean,
and
yeah,
being like, you know what, in the end it doesn't even matter. Like,
right.
just like all
I
these
know
mental
it, and
gymnastics,
of
like
course, I'm sure if you're an actor and like an artist, and I know that it's like I know that our brains are more susceptible to kind of like that weird brainwashing that was like going on, and that those
yeah,
them pulling at your heartstrings. Like I know that I was way more susceptible to than like, say, my sister, for example, who is a little more like nuanced with her thinking and a little more logical and like left brained and or right, whatever brain is logical.
Yeah.
And
No,
and
it's
not
right.
me. Like I was like a little bit like, oh my goodness, like I cry so easily at anything.
Sure.
I'm very easily manipulated by any kind of media and any person talking to me with confidence. I will be like,
Same.
okay, you know what I mean? Like, I'll do what you tell me to do. You're telling me it with confidence. Here I go. So that's why it's like, and it's just like tough and it's hard. And now I have to, knowing this about my brain, I have to be more careful.
Right. And I think more than anything, Alyssa, and I agree with you on so many levels, but something that we can definitely say that that both of us have is that we can be manipulated by music. Music is very manipulating in so many ways.
Oh,
like
yeah.
so much so that I can't watch shows like Chicago Fire or Chicago PD, or as my mom calls it, their Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I can't really watch shows like that because the music in those shows make me feel weird. Like they make me feel like on edge. And it's because that's the point. That's the point. It's supposed to make
you to feel that way.
But that's the whole thing, because there's nothing really happening on that show. Like it's the
so
music
funny.
telling
I've
you
never
like
seen
this
it.
is bad. Like
I've never. Yeah, see, I might like that.
That's anything.
I might enjoy
that's
that.
anything though. That's anything though. I mean, even going back to
and that's
like
going to church. That's what church is. You have
even
fancy
going
music
back
playing.
to church, yeah.
And what the worship leader is saying is like, everybody listen up. Today, you woke up
with his orgasm voice.
You know what I mean? And you've got that music playing, and they're like, and then tomorrow you're gonna wake up again, maybe not. And then that music's playing, and they're talking with that inflection, and then you're just like, okay, what? And so. Yeah, I think it's good to know. Right. We just have to be careful about the kind of stuff we ingest, whether it's, like Christian or not, and know your brain and your body and like what you can handle. And I know for me, I've gotten into like astrology just as like a fun. I don't like take it that seriously, but like there's a part of me that's like, oh wow, I heard that like, whatever your moon sign is, you might relate to singers and like songwriters that have that moon sign, because you feel similarly, you have like similar emotions. And I was like, I don't know how much I buy into this, but then I started looking up all of my favorite singers, and like they all kind of have my moon sign, and I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And like, you know what I mean? And I was like, the most relatable person to me is like Alanis Morissette, and we have the same exact like astrology. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but it's just weird. Like fun stuff like that when you think about like. But whether it's astrology or not, whatever you realize, like there are certain singers that maybe you do like resonate with the way they think and the lyrics they write and kind of like the musical like arrangement that they use. And I think that's beautiful. I mean, like to me, I know I'm like a comedian and like an actor, but like there's nothing in this world that like I need more than music. It's the one thing that is like the most healing entity for me. And so I think, and I know, sometimes I do just need to like sit in that sadness, and I need to listen to sad music, because it is important to feel our feelings, and you know what I mean? Like, but then you got to get out of it and listen to freaking, I don't know, what's a happy song? Freaking 90s club music, which is also really sad.
Sure.
Tonight
I mean, to be fair, like, I feel very similar, which like, when I've been writing music since I was in high school and things like that. And like, that's how I kind of get my sad stuff out, and like, and I have a band, and we've had, put out CDs and things like that. But like, at the end of the day, like, I'm much like every artist now, where it's like I kind of do everything. It's like a 20-sided die, where it's like, I'm an actor, but I also write music, and I'm also a comedian. I also improvise. Like I do a billion different things.
You gotta do everything.
You have to. You have no choice. They have a gun towards your head. You have no choice.
And they are forcing us. I am a writer, actor, improviser, sketch.
Yeah.
And
But yeah,
ventriloquist.
it's
Yeah,
and ventriloquist. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's wild, man. So I want to pivot just a little bit into another topic here. What were your favorite snacks growing up?
Oh, that's so fun. What a fun
Hmm.
question. I was kind of really into ham. I loved ham sandwiches. I'm sorry. I was a ham
Alyssa,
girl.
if you gave me 12 choices, I would have never said ham.
Really? I thought I
Let's
had ham energy. Oh, no, this is
I never
real.
saw you as a cold cut combo kind of a
I am
person.
a 100% cold cut girl through and through. So my dad used to go, there was this like, this local our market basket, which was like the cheap grocery store. And
Sure.
my dad would always go, and like the one kind of ham that was always on sale was called Kunzlers. So that was even my nickname. My dad would be like, Kunzler. He like called me Kunzlers, which is a type of ham. I
Yeah,
loved it
which
so
means
much.
you really like ham.
I really liked ham.
Like,
My
you are
dad
an iCarly character, dude. That is
kind
wild.
of, yeah. I liked ham. I would drink a lot of Coca-Cola, ham and a Coke. That's what my dad would always say. Hey, Liz, you want a ham and a Coke? Because I was just like, I was like the kid from Home Alone, like there was always pee in the bed. I
Sure.
didn't pee in the bed, but he was always like drinking Coke.
Yeah,
So yeah, I loved
Yeah.
Coca-Cola. I loved ham sandwiches.
I love that. I apologize for laughing because I should
No, it's
be
funny.
I should be more well, it's just funny because it's out of the box. Like
Ham. Not a lot of
would
people
just
are
be like,
going towards ham.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like ham is something you talk about when you ask like what's your favorite sandwich or like what's your favorite thing to have for
right.
Christmas dinner or like
But
things like that. Not like what's your
no,
favorite
yeah.
snack?
Oh, I
You
was
know?
snacking on ham. And I think like
I love
food
that.
was a big part of I grew up with a lot of older relatives. I was like very close with my great aunt and my great uncles, and so I was always around kind of like 70-year-olds, as this little girl, and they
Uh-huh.
were Hungarian, a very big Hungarian influence.
Mhm.
And so we were eating a lot of the Hungarian food, and we were making homemade noodles, which were really good, and like chicken paprika. So I was eating really
Okay.
hearty, heavy things, and like cabbage and noodles and butter and just like stuffed peppers. So I was eating very, very Eastern European hearty meals,
Right.
and that's what I was snacking on too, because we always had leftovers. So I was just, you know what I mean? I wasn't,
Right.
and I don't know, that was just kind of, yeah, it was like, oh, what am I gonna like eat? What's in the fridge? And it's like, oh, or there's leftover cabbage and noodles. So I'm like heating up cabbage and noodles.
Sure.
And like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but it was good. I
I
loved,
support that.
yeah, I had a really big appetite. And I was a runner. So I was always running and I was always eating. And I was also obsessed with like I always wanted to go out to eat, but we never did. But I was always like, please, can we go out to eat? Like, I just like loved the environment of being, even if it was like Long John Silver's, I loved, you know what I mean? I was like, oh my
Sure.
gosh. I just loved the idea of like our food
I
coming to
love
us like
this.
that, and being, and when you're out to eat, everybody's kind of sitting together, and like, and we would go to a lot of buffets. We were a big buffet family because it's cheap. My dad was kind of a cheapskate, but
Right.
yeah.
No, that's I mean,
So
whose isn't?
yeah,
But I
I
mean,
was.
to be fair, like I was gonna ask you. This is really fun. You spark something that I find that would be really fun to ask you. What was a place that you just wanted to go so bad, but your parents were like, no, you know?
No, yeah. I mean, I think it was this place called Haas's, which is like
Okay,
a funny name. But yeah, it was a
they just had a
buffet.
lot of ham
They
there.
had ham
Okay,
chunks. They did have those, like, for the salad. They had the salad bar. It was just a classic like buffet. But that was always what I wanted to do. Like after church, I was always like,
yeah,
please, can we go to Haas's? or Ponderosa, please. Like, you know,
Okay.
because I don't know. I just like loved it. And that to me was like, I felt fancy when I was at a restaurant, and I never
Sure.
really felt fancy. So I always wanted to go
Mhm.
there. And it was also like, I liked the way that when we were all there, we all had to like sit together. And I just
Yeah.
loved talking and being with my family. And like, so I think it was that, which is so like kind of sweet if you think about it, that I just wanted to go to
It is really
Haas's,
sweet.
you
I also
know,
find it
and
funny that I also find it funny that you were like, we all got to sit together, as if you were to go to another restaurant and they would separate you. You know?
well, I just mean that like everybody was always doing their own thing. And, you know, we had family
Right.
dinners, but like, oh, and you
You
know
mean at
what else
home,
I think
yeah.
it was? Yeah, at home. You know what else I think it was? Because growing up, my family, like everybody's family, like, you know, we did fight a lot. And there was a lot of yelling and screaming and like, and it was chaotic. And I did feel like when we were out to eat at a restaurant, everybody was on their best behavior and we
Mhm.
weren't screaming and we weren't getting into fights, and we were at the restaurant, and so we were all being good to one another. And I think that's why I wanted to go, you know. And you know,
Because you wanted the
not that it was like
control. Yeah, that's
abusive, but
cool.
yeah, I knew that like if we were in an environment
Yeah,
like that, we would all be kind of, you know. So but
of
yeah, that was
course.
kind of what I wanted.
It was actually the opposite for me because my family was like, we don't want to go out because Mike is going to make a scene. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, because I was just like, well, now's a great time to whip out an Ace Ventura impression. You know, like I
Oh,
was
well,
just
that's
that kind of
good.
kid.
No, I mean, that's great. I think, but you weren't
Yeah.
being mean to people. But yeah, that was
Of
like, and
course.
that
No,
also, I think I
no.
loved like family dinner, because that was also the time when, yeah, there was, I think that's, my family was always like, hey, you know, they always wanted me to do impressions, and they were like, you know, and it was kind
Mhm.
of like people at our church in the choir, they'd be like, oh, Liz, like do Joan, you know, and I would be like, okay, and I would get up and I would be like, I'm Joan, and I would walk like her, and they were like, it's so good. So that was always like, I felt like dinner was kind of like, it was like dinner and a show. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I really wanted to have those as much as we could.
Interruption, besties. I just wanted to take the time to talk about our good friends over at Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a wonderful nootropic and adaptogen drink that is very beneficial for brain fog and having less stress, yet giving you a little bit more energy. You know, I drink a lot of coffee. I used to drink a lot of coffee actually, and I would notice that it would give me a lot of anxiety. Sometimes it would give me the jitters. The thing with Magic Mind is made with matcha, and matcha is a very slow release energy. So you won't have the jitters and you won't get any of that kind of anxiety or anything like that. So basically, what this drink really does is it allows you to fire at all cylinders and just it eliminates brain fog. It's basically Creatorade, if you will, to steal a thing that Pete Holmes has said many times. And that's another thing. Magic Mind is talked about by so many different people. I mean, I heard about Magic Mind through Pete Holmes, and I actually started a subscription before they even started sponsoring our podcast, which is really crazy. That's how much I enjoy Magic Mind. I mean, Pete Holmes is talking about it on You Made It Weird. Joe Rogan is talking about it. Kim Kardashian is talking about it. I mean, if these people are talking about it, that means it has to be good. So if this sounds like something that you want in your life, please go to magicmind.com/childlike and use promo code BESTIE to get 20% off of your first order. That's magicmind.com/childlike and use bestie to get 20% off of your first order. I believe if you get a subscription, it's even more. I mean, this is quite a deal. So once again, visit magicmind.com/childlike to pick yourself up a case of Magic Mind and use promo code bestie to get 20% off of your order. Thanks so much to Magic Mind for supporting Childlike at Best. Now back to the show. Another thing that we like to do on this podcast is we like to talk about cereal, because I feel like it's the food that kind of
It's
encompasses
big.
childhood.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a big deal. So, what were your favorite cereals growing up, and why were they ham?
Oh,
No, I'm
and it was
kidding.
ham. No, I was a big, yeah, cereal was a huge, it's so funny because like I was just talking to my sister about this the other day because she was eating cereal, and I was like,
Mhm.
cereal makes me nauseous now for some reason, and I don't know if it's like the milk.
Yeah.
I don't have any like lactose intolerance, but there's something about it. Maybe it just like makes me nauseous if
Sure.
I eat it too early in the morning. But I eat really sugary things in the morning, so I don't know. But anyways, before I got nauseous eating cereal, I used to love.
Mhm.
I was a big fan of Count Chocula.
Sure. Yeah.
Count
Great
Chocula
cereal.
was really good. I also really loved Reese's Puffs,
Sure.
and
Okay.
I really liked Fruity Pebbles. Those
Okay.
were, but yeah, anytime
All
we had
right.
Count Chocula in the house, it was a great day for me. And I loved when the milk turned into chocolate milk. That was just like
Of
everything to
course.
me.
Yeah.
Because
So
I
you were a
wouldn't
chocolate
drink the
cereal
milk.
kind
I wasn't drinking the milk always. But if it was Count Chocula and Reese's Puffs, I was drinking the milk.
of. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at
Of
the end of it,
course.
I was downing it. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
something about Count Chocula that I liked everything about the Count, and I liked what he represented.
Sure. Yeah. He
It was
represented all
really
of
good, yeah.
chocolate.
And I remember kind of like
Yeah.
that was a funny thing. Like when I'm the youngest of three, and when my sisters went off
Mhm.
to college, and they would come back home to visit, I would hide the Count Chocula because I was like,
Mhm.
"This is my cereal," and
I
they're
love
like,
that.
"Alyssa, you can't hide the Count Chocula. Like we're in town, we still live here," and I was like, "You don't live here anymore, and this is my freaking cereal."
I
So
love that.
yeah,
I love that. I mean, look, there's a lot of kid hacks. Like at the end of the day, like, like eating all the marshmallows out of the Lucky Charms. Or another thing that
yeah.
I would do is eat all of the frosting from Frosted Mini Wheats and put everything back in the box.
Oh yeah, I did
And
like frosted mini wheats. That was, and I remember being like, "This is healthy." It's not, but I was like,
right?
"This keeps me regular." You know, I remember
Yeah,
being like,
yeah.
yeah, kind of getting into frosted mini wheats. That's really funny.
No, for sure. Yeah. So and now you're not really a cereal person, right? Now you're just what do you
No,
usually do in the
sadly,
morning now?
I'm a bagel girl. I eat a bagel every
You're a
morning.
bagel girl. I
And
like it
it's
too. I'm a
weird
bagel.
because I'm like this as I get older, I'm like I used to think I was such a like proponent of like switching things up and like I'm open to new things. And as much as I am and I am adaptable in many ways, there are many things where I'm just like I'm set in my ways. And I'm starting to feel kind of like my dad who was like a little bit like that, like he would eat the same thing all the time. And
Mhm.
I've lived in my same apartment for 10 years. And as much as I want to like view myself as this like changeable, funky girl, I'm like, I'm kind of not. I'm a creature of habit. I've lived in the same apartment 10 years. I eat a bagel every morning for breakfast, and like when I'm feeling funky, I'll make a soft scramble.
Yeah.
But and you know what, Mike, every day for lunch, I'm eating a turkey sandwich
There you
every
go.
day and
I
potato
love it.
chips. Like I'm
I
just
love
so
it.
it's like I don't know. There's not much that I need, and I'm happy to do that.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I
Yeah.
love sandwiches, and
Yeah.
I just don't know what else to say about it other than
No,
they're
that's
great.
I mean,
Other
that's a
than they're
beautiful
great.
yeah, they're great. Yeah, that's a beautiful Tony the Tiger reference. But
And it is, but
one
it is also probably a part of my culture. As much as I hate to say it, to say
Tony
that
the Tiger.
my culture is sandwiches. No, because where I'm from, Western Pennsylvania is like a big sandwich place.
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
That is something I
So,
did not know.
so it is interesting, and because it's like
Please elaborate.
what you grow up eating. Well, it's just there's a lot of it's a big sandwich culture there, and
Yeah.
we're known for you put coleslaw and fries on the sandwich because it's a
Mhm.
coal miner city, and the coal miners
Okay, this makes sense.
when
Yes.
they're like women were making their lunch for them, they were like, look, I got one hand, okay, I gotta eat everything, you gotta put it all in the
Mhm.
sandwich. So they put everything in the sandwich, and
Yeah.
then they're just eating it because they're like, my other hand's filled with coal. So
Yeah.
you got
My
you
other
put it all
hand's
on the
jerking
sandwich,
it
you know
off.
what I mean? Like just put it on, and my other hand's jerking myself off and
Yeah.
jerking my coal mining buddies
Yeah,
off, and
yeah.
then so
Yeah.
that's why it's like the
I
whole
got the
sandwich
coals
is
lube, I'm jerking it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. All right, you just
um
inspired my next character. It's coal miner guy
coal miner
eating
guy
a
who eats with one
sandwich.
Eats a sandwich with one
and
hand and
jerk it
jerks
off.
off the
Yeah,
bowl with the other.
that's why I put all the sides on the sandwich. Everything's on the sandwich. The cake, dessert. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
mhm.
that's wonderful. Shout out to all the coal miners out there jerking it.
Yeah,
So-
I'm a coal miner's granddaughter
Yeah.
and daughter. My dad was a coal miner for a little bit.
Are you a coffee drinker at all?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you love it.
big coffee head.
You're a big coffee head.
Oh, I'm a huge coffee head. I love coffee so much, and it's funny because I remember as a kid, my mom was a big coffee drinker, and I was always like, "Let me smell your coffee." I love the smell, but then I would like try to taste it, and I was like, "That's disgusting." But I was obsessed with the smell, and my mom would
Mhm.
always say, "Oh, you're gonna be a big coffee drinker because you like the smell." And that's, and it was just funny. And yeah, I didn't start drinking coffee until college. And
Okay.
I
I
think I
started
did, I
drinking
love,
coffee when I was 8 years old.
oh my gosh, that's
Oh yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it's because I was bored at church and the only thing to do was to drink coffee.
That's
So
so
I
funny. You were like an
so I
8-year-old
drank 12 cups of
pastor.
coffee.
That's so funny.
I was
Well, I
I drank
love the
8 cups of
ritual.
coffee.
I love like the ritual of like my morning coffee. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yes, of
I guess
course.
you could call me a caffeine addict. Like I guess I'm addicted to coffee. I don't know. I
Sure.
don't drink or do
Are
drugs, but
you a
like
French press girl? Are you a Chemex girl?
I do pour over.
Okay, you do pour over. Yeah.
I do pour over. I
Yeah,
have
that's
I
usually
grind my beans in the morning. Like I grind them and then I just do my pour over.
yeah,
It's very like
there's a
classic.
yeah, it's a nice like meditative process in a lot
It's
of
all
ways.
about the beans.
Yeah,
And
of
but I'm
course.
also like dousing. I also love my creamer.
Yeah,
I like my coffee sweet and creamy.
sure. Yeah.
So but yeah,
Yeah, I don't
I'm
blame you.
definitely I think that's my one and there's so many great coffee shops in LA that I
Mhm.
like I will spend $10 on a fancy coffee. I will. Please don't
Yeah,
put me in jail for that. Arrest
on a
me
science
if
experiment that happens to be coffee. Yeah,
yeah.
Intelligentsia, Blue Bottle, like stuff like that. I lived in LA
Dayglow.
for a little while, but I haven't
Yeah.
been
I
since the
mean
pandemic.
any big city and cool and even like small town. Like I just think there's like you're gonna find coffee heads.
Oh
And
yeah,
we will
for
find
sure.
each other. Yeah. So there I am again. I
Well,
am just so predictable, creature of habit.
no,
Yeah.
you're not predictable at all. In fact, I want to move on to our next bit here, which is I usually like to review a box of cereal with my guest. I
Mhm.
have a very specific cereal here for you. Usually, I like to pick a cereal that has something to do with my guest in some way, shape, or form.
Oh,
And
fun.
I yeah, and I spoke with my sponsors over at Off Limits, and they usually I have a joke where I say like, "Oh, I spoke with my sponsors," and from General Mills, and the joke is that they don't sponsor me, but this is actually a real sponsor. So
Oh,
I did speak
amazing.
with my sponsor. Yeah, which is great.
We
I
love
spoke with my
that. We
sponsors
love our
over at Off
sponsor.
Limits. Yeah, we and this is something that I feel is perfect for you. This is Off Limits Dash cereal. Now, this is a coffee flavored cereal.
Whoa, wait, how did you know I loved coffee?
Well, here's the thing. I'm really good at my job, Alyssa. So
But what have do I have who did you ask? What?
I didn't ask anybody. I just took one look and I was like, that seems about right. So
You could tell? I guess because
well,
I'm
it's
like
not only that.
energetic. This is
Yes, 100%.
amazing. Oh my gosh,
Well,
I feel so
one
seen.
No, the only reason it wasn't really because of the coffee. It was actually because you reminded me a lot of this bunny rabbit who is very
Oh
energetic,
my
horny,
god.
probably. I don't know. Like it's up to that
And the
up to that.
suit. I'm obsessed. And that
Yeah.
is a pose I
So,
do. This I feel so I want to eat this cereal. Wait,
yeah.
but hold
Well,
on. It's gluten free. I gotta have gluten. I love gluten.
well, there's a lot of look, this is made for adults that are, watching their nutrition. So
Wait,
like
is this
it is
real?
This is 100% real, Alyssa. This is
Oh
100%
my
real.
gosh. I
You can
have to
buy
get
this.
this.
Yeah, you can get it at eatofflimits.com, or you can go to Target and they have this cereal as well.
This is
They also
actually going to
have,
get me back into cereal.
yeah, well, there you go. So, and not only that, they know their audience. Right in the back, there's an adult coloring book right there. So,
Wow. That's
yeah, they know their
amazing.
audience. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Okay.
So,
And it's
this is a
vegan.
wonderful
That's
little
good.
cereal.
I'm
It is
vegan.
vegan. It is vegan, gluten free. It's coffee cereal that is naturally flavored by coffee,
Oh,
which is
that's
wild. I'm not
amazing.
sure. It does have caffeine in it. I did read it does have caffeine. I don't know. I think you would have to eat the entire box for it to equal an entire cup, but I'm not 100% sure. So I
No,
don't really
that's
know.
great. My favorite
But
flavor, I always get coffee ice cream. Like I love coffee flavored anything.
oh, it's the best, isn't it?
So
It's
good.
so good. I love it.
Mocha
Yeah.
mama.
I went to Jenny's. I went to Jenny's for the first time, and their coffee ice cream is out of this world.
It's so
It's so
good.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that I've shown you Dash, what I think would be really fun is if we can do a little ad for the besties, the listeners of this podcast, to get some off limits Dash cereal. And I think that it would be really fun if you played Dash, just because they have these cartoon characters, but there's no voices for Dash,
That's
so I
so
think you'd be the perfect
fun.
voice for Dash. Yeah,
Okay.
and you know what? I'll make it even easier for you. I'll put on some music. It's gonna be like a
Okay.
real ass commercial. This is gonna be
Okay.
amazing. All right, this is Off Limits Dash.
Hey everybody, are you hungry, but you also want to be energized at the same time? Well, you're in luck, because with my new cereal, which is coffee cereal, Dash, by Off Limits, you're going to get energized and nutritionized at the same time. And you don't got to worry about anything bad because it's gluten-free and it's vegan. Wow. It looks like I'm off to the races because I'm a bunny in a power suit. I'm a girl boss, going to do girl boss things. And the only way I can do that is by eating this cereal. All right, talk to you later.
I love it so much. Off Limits
Got a good
Dash,
voice.
ladies and gentlemen.
Off limits.
They said it
Dash.
couldn't be done, but we did it.
They said
That was perfect.
you'll
Are you kidding
never
me?
have a commercial for this in less than 2 minutes.
They said, yeah. They said you'll never have a commercial. They said Alyssa Sabo would never be able to voice it, but she did it.
But here we did it, and now we're getting a movie spinoff from that.
Yeah, we are.
commercial.
We are. Speaking of movie spinoffs, I wanted to talk about what's going on in the world of our actors and our writers. Have you been out on the picket line for the SAG strike and stuff?
Yeah, so I was out on the line for when the WGA went on strike. I was striking with some of my. I'm not in the WGA, but a lot of my friends are, and this was before SAG went on strike.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, it's like it's crazy the basic needs that actors and writers are asking for, but I've been out of town.
Yeah.
I just got back into town, and so I was out of town whenever SAG declared the strike. And but now I'm back, and I'm ready to be out there because it's so sad to me the way that like it's just the most basic of needs that we're hoping to get met, and these like executives and these streaming companies are just like, no, I don't think so. Like it almost feels like they're like cartoon villains. The way that, do you know what I mean? Like like the way that they're just like, no.
100%.
And it's so but
it is
crazy.
It is
And I'm
weird.
so glad though that it's happening. It's like definitely a much needed strike because it's really hard for anybody to make a living. It really is.
I've been talking to my partner about this actually, where I was just like, if I could go out there just for a week just to be on the picket line, I would do it. Like just to like meet people and hang out, just because like it's something that you know, because like, yeah, I'm in the union, but I'm here in Miami right now, so like it's not really gonna do much for me to like be out in a picket line at a Target, you
Are
know,
they
like it's
doing?
so like
Are they
okay,
picketing in Miami? Because there's like
they're
actors
not,
there, right? They're not.
no,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's
I
it's
mean,
me and
your
like three other people,
solidarity, there's like,
so
you just, I think the solidarity is still there. And like, as long as you just are,
of
we
course,
can't, obviously, there's like, I think you can still, I think I got an audition for like a soap opera, and I was like, soap opera. So
hmm
they're not really in the same category. Um,
yeah.
and
There's
then,
certain things like
commercials are
my
still kind of happening, and
yeah, my girlfriend actually works in she's directing a like political thing for transportation, and so SAG was completely okay with it because it's politics, like nobody's making money off of it, so it's fine, you
yes,
know.
yeah, yeah,
So
and
like
yeah,
stuff like
I have
that
some.
usually works.
Like I have some indie movies that I shot last year, 2 years ago, that are kind of now like, they're starting to make their way into the festival circuit. And
Mhm.
it's just sad that I do think that these movies are kind of probably going to be affected, because I don't
Of
know if like
course.
festivals are going to be as eager to do programming, because the whole point is to like
Well,
sell,
and
but
not only that, but like we're not allowed to talk about these things and like, you know, things like that, which is like which is weird because like, you know, I have a podcast and like part of my podcast is I love talking to people about how they grew up and their pop culture that they had. And I don't know if that means that I can't talk about certain things, you know? So like
oh
so
sure.
I'm just going off of like, well, I wasn't in this and neither is my guest, so why don't we just talk about it? Um my so with all of that, I'm just letting our audience know we're going to go off into this
Well,
tangent
I
for a
think, yeah,
second.
I mean, ultimately
I
I'd feel, I guess it's like one of those things where, yeah, because I don't even really know. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I don't even know if you, like, it's like, I don't want to talk about like, um, I don't know. Like, it's not that I'm like promoting these like movies and shows. It's just like, oh,
right.
well, these are the things that influenced me growing up. So I'm like talking about myself. But
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
because then it's like ultimately, like, if I talk about like the show Full House, and then people go and
Yeah,
watch Full House, the
which was
streamers
exactly
are
what I was going
making
to bring up.
money. I know, then the
Yeah.
streamers are going to make money off of it because we're talking, but I don't think that's what we're doing. I think I don't know. But again, this is all
I
like new
think at the
territory.
end of the
So
day, the streamers have Full House money already. You know what I mean?
yeah,
like they
but yeah, there you go.
the
I loved
people
Full House growing up.
yeah, people have yeah. Well, and not to mention you have a podcast about it, which I was like,
That's true.
where was I? Because I can talk about this. I can talk about
No, my
this
friend,
forever.
I want to bring that back. My friend, I was just hanging out with my friend Paige. She's a writer. She's who I was like picketing with because she's in the
Mhm.
WGA, and she and I like did that, and then I think she's like has children now, and I think we just both got busy, and that's why we stopped doing it. But now I think Jodie Sweetin and Andrea Barber have a pod, and so
They
does
sure
Dave
do.
Coulier
Yeah.
about
Well,
Full
Dave
House, and
yeah,
mm,
yeah. Dave Coulier stepped back because of the actor strike,
I
but
know.
How Rude Tanneritos is still going strong.
Oh yeah,
But
that's
yeah, it's
kind of weird. I
difficult.
wonder why they're doing that. Yeah, I
I
don't know. I
love
guess
it.
maybe like for this we can just talk about other stuff, because I don't I want to, I'm very much like in solidarity with SAG, and
No, of
I
course,
don't know
and
if I
as am
really want to
I.
like,
As am
yeah.
I.
I can talk to you though about like
No, as am I.
comedians who influenced me, because Adam Sandler was a huge influence on me. Chris Farley, Molly Shannon, Tim Meadows, like those people changed my life. You know what I mean? Like when I saw Chris
Yeah.
Farley um perform for the first time, I was like 8 years old. I think that's when I was like, I want to do that. I want to do what he's doing. So those, you know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
that's just like to see, and it's like funny that Chris Farley was the one that me, and I was this like puny little shrimpy little 8-year-old girl. But I think what
Yeah.
attracted me to him was like, because I think I saw him like on a talk show, like on freaking Letterman or something, and he was just like the audience, he was so obsessed with like making the audience laugh, and would do anything with his body to do that. And I saw my dad and my mom and my sisters like laughing at that, and I was like, and I saw that and I was like, that's love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I was like, they love him and the audience loves him and I want to be loved. And so I started using my body and in that way, like where I was just like, I would do anything to get a laugh and like look silly and look goofy and make a silly face. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, Chris is a great inspiration in so many levels, you know, just because like, yes, he was that energetic and, you know, person that had a lot of commitment, as I talked about in the beginning, that you have, you know, but also he had a sketch that I felt, you know, and after reading his memoir and things like that, I was realizing this is probably who he actually was as a human being, was when he would do like the Chris Farley show bit.
Oh
where
yeah,
he
that's
was
who
like,
he was.
Like just like, oh, like remember when you were in Die Hard, you know, like
Yeah.
like to Bruce Willis, you know, and then
It's
just like
so,
stupid, I'm
yeah.
such an idiot, like, you know, which
And
is so like how comedians feel, you know.
oh, totally. That like that sad clown. I mean, it's like a tale as old as
Mhm.
time, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
There was just something, I think there's something about, for me, it is like, as cheesy as it may sound, comedy in doing this is like, while it's very isolating at times and very like, you're not getting a ton of like, monetary rewards that often. The
Sure.
amount, like when I do view it as like, I want, when people, especially that's why I love performing live so much. And when people come and see me live, I know that if like for a brief moment, even if I'm on stage for 1 minute and I can, with that 1 minute that I'm on stage, me and the audience, we can have this like very real moment where we're both just like escaping our like depression and our anxiety and we're laughing. And whether that means that I'm being like a psycho and it's like taking them out of that darkness for 1 second, because it takes me out of the darkness and it takes us both out of that darkness for 1 second and we connect and we can have this moment there. It's like, I know I sound like maybe a little kooky, but like, it's just the most
Not at all.
spiritual and like beautiful thing to me that you could ever do. And like, it's just, and that's why I feel the most like myself on stage. And that, you know, it's kind of crazy. You have like this weird relationship with like the stage, and then knowing that the audience, like, they don't really know you, but like, I want them to know me. I want them to not feel so alone. I don't want to feel alone. And we have that moment, and then it's over. And then I have to like be with myself again. But yeah, that's like, to me, that's like what I love and why I'm going to do it forever, no matter if I ever like am able to really kind of make a real living off of this. And that, you know what I mean? And that's why, and it is hard because as much as I love my family, I want to be like close to them. I know that like, I have to be either in LA or, you know, whatever, these big cities to really perform, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Like, ultimately it's like, maybe I can be touring. And
that's such a beautifully put way of just talking about being a performer and things like that. You said it better than I could have ever said it, and that's exactly how I feel. I mean, so much so that like, you know, you down to like when you were like, I know these people don't know who I am and all this stuff, but like the thing that I always say in my head is like, these, you know, before I go on stage, I'm always like, these people might not know who you are, but give them a reason to never forget, you know?
sure.
And so
And
like, that's kind of what I do.
I don't know if I'm like obsessed with like wanting them to know me and to be like,
Of
ooh, I
course
love her.
not.
But
Yeah.
like, I want them, it's more about, I want them to feel good when they see me up
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
And you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's why like, and of course, I don't know if I've always been that way as a performer. I think early on when I was starting out, maybe it was more about like, they need to know who I am. I'm the best and I want to be the best. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, I don't think that's like what this is all about. And even, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's this weird thing where I'm like, and of course my Christian upbringing, I'm sure there was always a part of me. I always like loved being in the spotlight. I always loved kind of like you know, you're at a party and I love for everybody to be listening to my story but I always felt like it was a natural thing for me to do, but then I always felt guilty about it. And I was like, is this wrong? Like, and so, you know what I mean? And like being like, am I, and like, of course, you know what I mean? And it's like weird because I'm like, yeah, I guess I want to be a famous comedian and I'm putting my stuff out there and you know what I mean? But it's also like, it's the concept of like fame and stuff is so weird. And,
of course.
You know,
Well, to piggyback off
weird.
of what you're saying though, like stand-up and improv are so different, and in this regard specifically, because stand-up is about you and only you, and if you fail it's your fault, and if you succeed it's your fault, as opposed to like improv being very like this, we are servicing a show. At the end of the day, if the show goes well, I was a part of the show. It has nothing to do with me.
I know.
It has everything to do with the show.
Well, and I think
which
like
is such a beautiful way to look at it. Yeah.
I also think though, like good stand-ups will make the whole audience feel like they're all like we're all in this together.
Agreed.
That, like, you know what I mean? And that's always that's like what the best stand-ups I've seen in those shows, and that's why like it's so fun when you're there, because it's like this moment will never be recreated. And that's why I don't even like necessarily watching stand-up specials on like Netflix and stuff, because I'm like there's something so magical about being there. And like, you know what I mean? I saw like Sarah Silverman was like, and she's one of my biggest, like she's incredible. And she was Sarah's on a show that I was like on, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like this is, but I mean, ultimately I have like, I love watching her specials, like no matter what, but like there was something so magical about seeing her live, and like she's so giving and so like it was just, you know what I mean? It was, I just like the whole time I was watching, I was just like, my eyes were just like bugging out of my head, and I just felt so like I think that she, you know what I mean? I think that's like what she wants. I think she wants people to not feel alone. She's like, hey, let's talk about this, you know? Whereas like, yeah, of course, like you go to open mics and then there's just stand-ups that are up there and they're like, oh, when I was jerking it the other day, it was awesome. Yeah. And you're like, what?
Jerking it while I was holding
what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway.
No, I mean, these coal miner stand-ups, yeah, it's crazy. But no, no, I you know, I completely agree with you. And I wanted to say this last thing, and then we'll move on to the last question here, because I know you have a heart out. But the thing about like, you know, like it's the best stand-up comedians, I think, you know, would play the audience like, it goes back to music, like you're playing the audience like some sort of an instrument, and you're making the audience a part of it, you know, as opposed to like, these are my jokes and it's about me, you know, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Because that doesn't always go over well, you know.
Well, and it's funny because is like, it's so funny. I saw one of my favorite singers live, Kurt Vile, and I was like, I'm obsessed with him. I listen to his music all the time, and I'm like, saw him live, and I was really close to him, you know what I mean? And I was just like, as I'm standing there watching him do his thing, which is just so natural for him, he's like so through and through a musician, and he's like doing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And I'm like watching him, and I'm sort of like worshiping him in a way. You know what I mean? I'm just like, and like, I know, but then it's also his music. But then I'm just thinking about like the idea that I'm like, the idea of like being a fan is so like, there's something so weird and dehumanizing about it. But then it also goes back to like religion, where I'm like, that's what I used to do. I would worship Jesus Christ. And you know what I mean? But anyways,
no, I totally get it.
So, it's kind of funky, and you know what I mean? But it's like, whatever, you can idolize people and they make you feel good, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, so much so, I mean, I literally started this podcast before we recorded saying that I had like a giant talent crush on you. So, I mean, we can all idolize people or be inspired by other people. I think there's nothing wrong with that at the end of the day, you know?
Totally.
But I do want to ask you these last couple of questions here. I find them to be some of the most important questions when it comes to this podcast, at least in general. There's no wrong way to answer this question. You can answer it as a joke or vulnerably, however you want to. There's no wrong answer. The
Okay.
first question is, what advice would you give to your younger self if you were to meet them today?
I would say have fun. I would say
Yeah.
try to have fun and just
Yeah, it's not that serious.
relax. You know what I mean? Like I know
Yeah.
that sounds, me and my sister were like talking about that, like she told me that recently. Like she was like, I think we just need to have fun, you know, because I wasn't doing that.
Mhm.
I was not having fun. I was so obsessed with like everybody's eternal salvation and where they're going to go
So
when they're
true.
done. And you know what
Yes.
I mean? And I really
I
think
relate
that
to it so
like
much. Yeah.
I think it's important to pursue fun and
Yes.
joy, you know. So
Yeah.
I would tell her to like, you know, kind of have fun. Try to have fun.
Now to ask you this last question here, what do you think that girl would think of who you are today? Would she be proud of you? Would she think that you're cool? What would she think about you?
Wow. That is a good question. I think she would be proud of me. I think
I think
she
so
would
too.
be like, yeah, I think she would be really like, um, yeah, I think she would be proud of me because I think everything I am doing is like for her.
Yeah.
It really is, you know what I mean? And there were
Man, I
moments
can't
where
relate to you more than right now. I mean,
yeah,
this
it's,
is the most I've related to you this whole hour and a half. Like everything I do is for that little kid.
yeah, and
Seriously.
she,
Like
and
I
like,
mean, I might start
I
crying,
am
but like
protecting
it's
her.
true. Like
I
yeah.
know. There's so
Yeah.
much, there's so many people that have come along that I thought were there to love her and me,
Mhm.
and they weren't. And then, and I
Mhm.
was like, I'm not gonna stick around here because this, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
then I think like, I'm sure there's some stuff where she would be like, you need to, like, I think she would kind of even tell me, that sometimes I am being a little, hard on myself. I think maybe I was
Mhm.
like a little bit quicker to forgive myself, and I think she would also be like, maybe ease up, and because I know I'm always like making fun of my old journals, she would be like, hey, come on.
Right.
We took this seriously, you know, and that is something where I'm like, no, 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 there's so much love there. I think ultimately she would
Yeah.
like find it hilarious because even, you know what I mean, I've always
Of
just been
course.
like cracking myself up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back home for a little bit. I was helping my mom. She was recovering from knee replacement surgery. And I would, you know, I was pretty much with her most of the time. And then, but there was like every hour or two of the day, I would like go on a walk and kind of go up into the woods where I used to run cross country. And this one day in particular, I was just feeling very like energetic. And I was feeling very like, that was the day that I just felt very much like I want to get back in touch with like young Alyssa. And, you know, I was like doing everything I used to do when I was that age, which was like, it was like dance walking and like and just being so, and which I do that, but like in a way that was like not just to like post it or to like talk about it, to just do
Mhm.
it. And I guess now I'm talking about it. But I was like, I
Yeah.
used to do those like little performances and just to nobody. And so I'm like in the middle of the woods, in the deepness of the woods. It's like silent. There's nobody there. And I'm just like dancing my head off. And like, I felt so in tune with like that little girl that just used to just, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like she just wanted to dance. And like, I think I was even like, I was dancing for the
That's really
trees.
inspiring.
You know, I was just
Yeah.
like,
That's really
I'm
inspiring.
dancing for the trees right now, and they're dancing
Mhm.
with me, and it was like I felt like a psycho, but I was like, this is awesome, and
No, it
and
is.
I felt like a sense
I
of
can't.
peace.
Yeah.
I felt a sense of peace, you
Of
know, and
course.
like so that was
Mhm.
pretty cool. And then I came home, and my mom was like, check for ticks, and I was like, oh no, I got a tick, and I was like, you know what, it would be worth it if I got a tick in here tonight because I just had
Oh
the
my
best
gosh.
night of my life. So yeah.
Alyssa Sabo, I adore you. You're an amazing human being. Thank you so much for being a part
Oh,
of this.
you're
It
amazing. Thank
means
you. This
the
is an
it
incredible
means the
pod.
world. Oh well,
Thank you for
thank you.
I feel
Please.
very like good. I feel like lifted, you know?
Good. I'm
And you're
glad.
awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, let the besties know where they can find you online and how they can support you in every way
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I'm over on Instagram and I guess Twitter. I don't know if it's still a thing. And Threads at Alyssa_Sabo. Threads. And then I'm
Mhm.
on TikTok. I do post a lot more on TikTok at Alyssa
Mhm.
Sabo. And, you know, find me on there, connect, let's DM. I like to DM. I'll just, anybody
Yeah.
that has a question, I'm like, hello, how are you?
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't always do, I can't always do it. But, you know, if you ask an interesting enough question.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely. No, I love it.
yeah, that's, oh, and
Yeah.
I'm actually on Cameo. I have to like set
Okay,
up my
sweet.
account.
Yeah.
I have to set up my account. I got approved to be on there. They asked me to be on, so
Well, listen.
that
If
could
you
be a
need
way.
a birthday shout out, if it's your
Oh
anniversary,
yeah.
go to Cameo and get Alyssa
Or
Sabo to do something
if
for you.
you know, and the other thing I think I'm gonna do a lot of on Cameo, which I hope I want to do it, is I want to encourage people on there. I think that's like one of my
That's
strengths.
so awesome.
I
Yes.
can gas you the heck up. So, or,
Yes.
you know, if you need to
Do
break up
that.
with a boyfriend, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I have broken up with a lot of boyfriends and I've been broken up with a lot. So if you are going through
Mhm.
some love struggles, come to me for that. I will give you a message.
That's
Give you a
amazing.
word.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. For me, you can follow me at Instagram at Mike Valdes. You can go to thekidfromup.com. That is my website until Disney sues me. And other than that, thank you so much for listening and being a part of this. Do not lose your sense of childlike wonder, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great week.
Amen.
Bye, besties.